Charlie Munger said something that should terrify every middle-class person watching this. Envy is the only one of the 7 deadly sins that doesn't give you any pleasure at all. Think about that. Greed feels good when you're getting more. Lust feels incredible in the moment. Even gluttony has its satisfying moments. But envy just burns. It consumes your bank account while offering absolutely nothing in return. And here's the brutal part. The middle class has turned envy into a financial strategy. They're bleeding out slowly, month after month, trying to keep up with people who are also pretending to have it together. And nobody's winning except the creditors. Caleb sat in a Starbucks in 2013, overhearing 2 guys in their 40s comparing car leases. One had just upgraded to a BMW 5 Series. The other was talking about needing to match it with an Audi. Both were complaining about being broke. Both made 6 figures. Caleb was sitting there in a 10-year-old jacket, driving a paid-off Honda with more liquid capital than both of them combined. That moment crystallized something Charlie Munger had been saying for decades. The middle class isn't poor because they don't make enough money. They're poor because they've been brainwashed into believing that looking wealthy is the same as being wealthy. This video isn't about motivation. It's not about manifesting abundance or positive energy. This is about the mathematical brutality of middle-class financial behavior and why Charlie Munger, one of the smartest investors who ever lived, called most of it stupidity. We're going to dissect 5 specific traps that keep the middle class exactly where they are, comfortable, enough not to panic, but trapped enough to never escape. And if you're sitting there thinking this doesn't apply to me, that's probably the clearest sign that it does. Munger didn't build a fortune through complexity. He built it through discipline, compounded over decades. The Stoics didn't achieve peace through wishful thinking. They achieved it through brutal self-honesty. And Caleb didn't retire at 47 through luck. He retired because he stopped playing the game everyone else was losing. By the end of this, you'll see exactly where your money is bleeding, why you're staying stuck, and the stupidly simple formula that actually works. But fair warning, you're going to hate how simple it is. Because if it's this simple, you'll have to admit you've been making it complicated on purpose. Caleb sat at a dinner party in 2014, watching a former college buddy pull up in a brand new Tesla Model S. The guy made roughly the same salary Caleb did, maybe even less. But there he was, keys dangling, smile wide, soaking up the admiration. Caleb felt it, that uncomfortable tightness in his chest, that whisper saying, "You should have that too." Envy is the only deadly sin that offers zero pleasure, yet it's the one people indulge in most freely. You don't enjoy envying someone, you just bleed silently while pretending everything's fine. And that bleeding isn't emotional, it's financial, measurable, and absolutely devastating. Here's what infinite envy costs in cold numbers. That colleague bought the Tesla for $85,000, financed at 6% over 7 years. He's paying $1,180 per month. Over those 7 years, he'll hand over $99,120 for a car that'll be worth maybe $25,000 when it's paid off. That's $74,000 evaporated into thin air trying to look successful. Caleb did the opposite calculation. He drove his 2012 Honda Accord and invested that $1,180 monthly difference into an S&P 500 index fund. 7 years later, with average 10% returns, it became $138,000. Same time frame, same income level. One guy spent $74,000 to impress people he doesn't like. The other built $138,000 in actual liquidity. The difference? One refused to play the envy game. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that should be tattooed on every credit card. Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself and your way of thinking. The Romans already knew this 2,000 years ago. Envy isn't about what others have. It's about your inability to control your own thoughts. Caleb learned to ask one brutal question every time he felt the chest tightness. Will having this thing change my actual life or just my Instagram? The answer was always the same. And once you kill envy, you free up an insane amount of mental and financial bandwidth. But here's the twisted part. Envy isn't the only trap. The real killer for the middle class is something even more insidious. The comfort of good enough. Caleb remembers the exact moment he realized most people aren't drowning. They're floating, which is somehow worse. It was 2016, sitting in a corporate meeting where everyone around the table made between $75,000 and $95,000 a year. Good salaries, comfortable lives. Nice suburbs, decent cars, annual vacations. Not one of them was in crisis, but not one of them was building anything either. They'd all reached good enough, that dangerous plateau where you're not desperate enough to change, but not successful enough to be free. The middle class doesn't fail because of catastrophe. They fail because comfort is a slow-acting poison that makes you believe stability and freedom are the same thing. They're not even close. Let's put numbers to good enough. Average middle-class household makes $75,000 a year. After taxes, roughly $57,000 take home. Mortgage or rent eats $18,000. Car payments, insurance, maintenance, another $8,000. Food, utilities, phone, internet, $12,000. Kids, entertainment, random expenses, $10,000. They're left with $9,000 a year, maybe $750 a month. Most save nothing. Some save $200 to $300 monthly if they're responsible. In 30 years at 8% returns, that $300 monthly becomes $447,000. Sounds good until you realize that's still not freedom, it's just a cushion. Meanwhile, if they'd gotten uncomfortable early, cut that lifestyle by 30%, and invested $1,000 monthly instead, that becomes $1.49 million. The difference between comfortable and uncomfortable for 10 years is literally $1 million of freedom. Seneca said it perfectly. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. Comfort makes you crave just enough to stay comfortable, never enough to break free. Caleb watched colleagues celebrate small promotions, raise their lifestyle slightly, and stay exactly where they were on the freedom scale. Zero movement. He did the opposite. Every raise, every bonus, every unexpected windfall went straight into investments. His lifestyle stayed flat, while his capital grew exponentially. The Stoics called this voluntary discomfort, choosing hardship now to build strength later. Most people do the reverse, choose comfort now, get forced hardship later, when they're 65 and realize they can't retire. But here's what nobody tells you about all this stability the middle class chases. You might have a steady paycheck, but that doesn't mean you have freedom. And that's a distinction that changes everything. Caleb had a conversation in 2017 that still haunts him. A friend, 52 years old, solid job at a Fortune 500 company for 28 years, owned his home outright. 2 cars paid off. On paper, the guy looked stable as hell. But when Caleb asked if he could retire, the answer was immediate. Are you insane? I need this job. That's when it hit him. This man didn't own his life. His lifestyle owned him. He had stability, sure. A predictable paycheck every 2 weeks. But zero freedom. If that company fired him tomorrow, he'd be scrambling within 6 months. He'd built a decorated cage, beautiful on the outside, still a cage. Stability is having something consistent. Freedom is not needing that consistency to survive. Here's the math that separates the stable from the free. Stable guy, $90,000 salary, $6,000 monthly expenses, 0 passive income. He needs that job every single month. Missed 3 paychecks and he's in crisis mode. Now look at freedom. Same $90,000 salary, but he kept expenses at $4,000 monthly and invested the difference for 15 years. At 9% returns, that $2,000 monthly becomes roughly $730,000 in capital. That capital generates about $5,500 monthly in passive income at a conservative 9% annual return. Now his $4,000 monthly expenses are covered by investments. The job becomes optional. He can take it or leave it. That's freedom. The stable guy and the free guy had the same income for 15 years. The difference wasn't luck or genius. It was understanding that a paid-off mortgage doesn't mean jack if you still need to work until you're 70. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of history's greatest philosophers, understood freedom better than most people ever will. No man is free who is not master of himself. You can own your house, own your car, have 0 debt, and still be a slave to your paycheck. True freedom is when your assets generate enough cash flow that your time becomes yours again. Caleb built this systematically. Every investment decision was measured against one question. Does this move me closer to or further from not needing my salary? Most people never ask that question because they're too busy chasing what looks like wealth. And that's the next brutal truth. Most of the middle class is confusing income with wealth, consumption with progress, and it's costing them everything. Caleb watched his neighbor upgrade to a bigger house in 2018. The guy had just gotten promoted to senior director. Salary jumped from $110,000 to $145,000. First thing he did, bought a $650,000 house, up from his $380,000 starter home. New mortgage, new furniture, new everything. 6 months later, same guy complained about being broke at a backyard barbecue. Caleb just nodded, but inside he was screaming. This is the core delusion of the middle class. They think income and wealth are the same thing. They're not even distant cousins. Income is what flows through your hands. Wealth is what you keep and multiply. Most people are just high-paid funnels, channeling money from their employer straight to creditors, retailers, and the government. Nothing sticks. Let's dissect this financial negligence with real numbers. Guy making $145,000 takes home about $95,000 after taxes. New house payment, $3,200 monthly. Property tax and insurance, $900. That's $49,200 annually just for the roof. Add 2 car payments, $850 monthly, utilities, $400, food, $800, insurance, $300, and you're at $78,000 in fixed annual costs. He's got $17,000 left for everything else: clothes, entertainment, emergencies, retirement. He's making $145,000 and living like he makes $50,000. Meanwhile, Caleb, at the same $145,000 income, kept living in his paid-off $280,000 house, drove a 7-year-old car, and invested $55,000 annually. Over 15 years at 10% returns, that's $1.9 million in investable assets. The neighbor? He's got equity in an expensive house he can't sell without downsizing. One built liquidity, the other built a lifestyle. Only one of those can feed you when you're 60. Marcus Aurelius was emperor of Rome. He literally had access to infinite wealth. Yet he wrote, "Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are." When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. The Stoics understood 2,000 years ago what modern people refuse to accept. Consumption is a treadmill that speeds up the more you feed it. Caleb made a rule in his early 30s. Every dollar has to answer one question: are you building my machine or feeding someone else's? Mortgage interest feeds the bank's machine. New car payments feed the dealership's machine. Investments feed your machine. Most middle-class people spend 40 years feeding everyone else's machines and wonder why they never get ahead. But Charlie Munger figured this out decades ago, and his formula is so simple, it's almost insulting. Almost. Caleb spent thousands of dollars on financial books, courses, and seminars in his 20s. He learned about options trading, real estate syndications, cryptocurrency arbitrage, tax loss harvesting strategies, all complicated, all promising shortcuts. Then in 2013, he watched a Charlie Munger interview where the old man said something so simple it felt like a slap. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference. Avoid doing stupid things. Wait, that's it. No secret sauce. No complex algorithm. Caleb realized he'd been searching for a treasure map when the treasure was sitting in plain sight the entire time. People don't fail at wealth building because the formula is complicated. They fail because the formula is so boring and unglamorous that they refuse to believe it works. Here's Munger's formula with actual numbers that prove its brutal effectiveness. Start at 25 years old. Earn $50,000 annually. Take home $38,000 after taxes. Leave on $28,000. Not poverty, just disciplined. Invest the remaining $10,000 annually into a boring S&P 500 index fund. Average historical return, 10% annually. At 45 years old, you have $630,000. At 55, you have $1.8 million. At 65, you have $4.9 million. Same person, same modest starting salary, zero genius required. The only variable was compound discipline doing the boring thing consistently for decades, while everyone else chased exciting opportunities that went nowhere. Caleb started this at 28, not 25. He still retired at 47 with enough capital to never think about money again. The formula doesn't care about your excuses. It only cares about your consistency. Epictetus taught his students, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. The Stoics didn't complicate philosophy. They simplified it to principles so clear a child could understand them. Wealth building is the same. You don't need sophisticated strategies. You need the discipline to execute simple ones repeatedly. Caleb's entire fortune was built on Munger's 4-step formula, and nothing else. No day trading, no crypto gambling, no over-leveraged real estate deals. Just spend less, invest the difference, avoid stupidity, and let time do the heavy lifting. The middle class struggles, not because they lack intelligence or opportunity. They struggle because they can't sit still long enough to let the formula work. They want complexity because it feels like progress. But complexity is just another form of envy, the belief that someone else has a better secret you don't know about. They don't. You've had the formula the entire time. Here's what Charlie Munger understood that most people refuse to accept. Wealth isn't built by people who do extraordinary things. It's built by people who refuse to do stupid things consistently. The middle class isn't trapped because they lack opportunity or intelligence. They're trapped because they've normalized financial behaviors that are mathematically guaranteed to keep them exactly where they are. Envy drives them to buy things they don't need. Comfort sedates them into believing stability is the same as freedom. And the entire time they're confusing a paycheck with wealth, consumption with progress. Caleb says something that sounds harsh but is absolutely true. Most people aren't failing at wealth building. They're not even trying. They're just playing a game of financial dress-up, hoping that looking rich will somehow make them rich. It never does. The Stoics figured this out 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius had unlimited resources and chose simplicity. Seneca was one of the wealthiest men in Rome and preached detachment from material excess. Epictetus was a slave who became free by mastering his own mind. They all understood the same truth. Real wealth is internal control, not external accumulation. The formula Munger gave us is so simple, it's offensive. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference. Avoid stupidity. Wait, that's it. No secret algorithm, no complex strategy. Just discipline compounded over decades. But here's why most people never execute it. It requires admitting that all the complexity, all the financial stress, all the keeping up was self-inflicted. It requires looking at your life and saying, I've been doing this wrong. And that's a level of honesty most people will never reach. So here's the question you need to ask yourself, and you need to answer it with brutal honesty. Are you building liquidity or just funding a lifestyle? Are you creating freedom or just decorating a cage? Are you making financial decisions based on what moves you forward or what keeps you looking successful to people whose opinions don't matter? Because you can't do both. You can look rich or be rich. You can have stability or freedom. You can play the middle class game or escape it, but you can't do it halfway. Caleb made his choice in his late 20s. He spent a decade being the guy with the old car, the small house, the boring lifestyle. And he retired at 47 with complete financial freedom. The people who laughed at him, they're still working, still trapped, still one layoff away from financial crisis. The math doesn't lie. The Stoics didn't lie. Munger didn't lie. The only person lying to you is the voice in your head saying, I'll start next year, or this doesn't apply to me. That voice is the reason you're still reading this instead of already being free. If this video made you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is information. It's your brain recognizing truth it's been avoiding. Now the question is what you do with it. You can close this video, go back to your routine, and pretend everything's fine. Or you can make one decision today that moves you toward freedom instead of just stability. One decision, not 10, just one. If you're ready to see more brutal financial truth mixed with ancient wisdom that actually works, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. We don't post fluff. We don't sell courses. We just dissect the math and psychology that separates people who build wealth from people who just look wealthy. And if you want to go deeper into how Charlie Munger actually built his fortune using principles most people ignore, watch the next video where we break down his investing philosophy combined with Stoic discipline. It's not complicated, but it will challenge everything you think you know about money. The cage door is open. Whether you walk out is entirely up to you.